Well, we are now 2 weeks into March, so it's been about 2 months since I burned this pile down. I was originally planning on cleaning this pile up and getting everything out of here the week after, but we ended up just getting snowstorm after snowstorm, and I couldn't even get the trailer and stuff back here because it was just all ice, snow, and water. So now that everything's sort of melted out and nothing's frozen to the ground anymore, I can go through and sort this pile out and get that into the trailer. And then we can toss the rest of this material in the trailer with that load. And that should be a pretty full load, but in between that time we've had a few windstorms, and as you can see, I do have a pine tree that finally broke and fell over. These other ones are dead as well. Fortunately, these died the year after I cleared all this stuff. Most of them I didn't touch at all. This one closer to the front I did probably nick the roots on, but every pine tree in this cluster just died, so I'm assuming it was a disease. And then over here on the right side of my yard, the two small hardwood trees I sort of left over in this corner. This one on the right ended up snapping over in the last windstorm we had due to the fact that the bark that was scraped off on the bottom just ended up rotting the whole tree out. So this one to the left of it's very similar, and last year it wasn't looking too hot. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come over here and pop both these out, because this one's going to die and break, and I might as well just grab them both at the same time. And then the biggest one that broke is this ash tree that was next to the propane tanks. You may be wondering, oh man, where did that top go? I hope it didn't go into the house. Well, luckily it snapped and fell really graciously into these hemlocks. So that top will be somewhat easy to get out. And then of course, since the top is off this thing, I can just notch the bottom and push it out into the trail here. trailer's all loaded up, ready for the week when the dump opens. And now we can go see if we can snag some of those broken trees. That came down nice and easily, and I'll just take the skid steer of the tractor with the grapple and just clear through this stuff. And I guess we're gonna need the tractor anyway, because I gotta get to the other side of the yard to take those other 2 trees out. Well, I got both those trees out of here. Unfortunately, this section over here is still pretty frozen, and that stump was actually buried quite deep under a bunch of loam too, so it was just going to be a mess trying to pull that out. So I'll just wait for all of this area to fully defrost, and then I'll come back up here in a few weeks and seed it up again once all these chunks have melted. But yeah, the tractor did the job here. Got those two out of here. This one was pretty rotted in the center, which I expected, so good thing I took it out now before it becomes a big problem. Alright, let's go get the skid steer with the grapple and clean up the trail. Alright, well, I used that grapple during the winter when it was cold and there was water, so both of the couplers I believe are locked up right now. Whether they're frozen or they're damaged, I'm not sure, but I hit them with the torch for a few minutes, cracked them open, took out the hydraulic pressure, but they're just not clicking or letting me push them into the other couplers. So for the moment, I'm just going to leave this as it is and give those couplers a couple days exposed in the sun just to hopefully thaw out if that's the real problem. Alright, after letting these couplers sit out in the sun for another day or two, loosen them up enough where I could actually shove them into the receiving couplers on the machine. Basically both the couplers were just frozen up because they're sitting under that shield back in the shade in the snow. And now that we've had some nice warm days out and I hit them with the torch, they've opened up. All right, that cleaned up really good actually with the Grapple. I figured it would be a little bit worse, but luckily got pretty much all the sticks. Just had to toss a couple out by hand that were just too small. And yeah, it's really nice. Really nice having that Harley rake. Able to just regrade this whole thing out, churn it up, get it packed back in, and should be good for majority of this season. All right, let's go clean up the ash pile from the fire. Cool, that cleaned up nice and easy, and all of that topsoil and ash and everything I just shoved right into the composting pile. I gotta turn that thing around at some point this season, but it's all good stuff to get integrated in there and more nutrients. So now I can drive back through here and get to the trailers and the equipment, no problem. All right, so that'll probably close out this little cleanup session of the rest of the fire and some fallen trees. I'm still not sure what I want to do with this cluster of trees here. I believe they're all on my property, if not these immediate 3R plus that leaning one. So I'm probably gonna take those down at some point, but just not quite yet because I have so much material over here between all those logs back there, all the logs up there. I want to try to figure out how I'm offloading that stuff first, and I still have to go and empty that trailer anyway. Didn't have time this week. That will likely be in an upcoming video of some sort, but I know there's a whole bunch of stuff I got to do back here one way or another, and this year might be the year I finally pull the trigger and clean up this center and everything and get some stone in here at least, so that it's not a mud pit every time it rains. But that's a decision for a future video, and for now I'm gonna go enjoy the rest of my afternoon.